I will now introduce the next presenters, and they are Perillo and Arcese, who collaborate occasionally between each other, but also collaborate with many other architects and other professionals. So collaboration, if I'm right, is also kind of important aspect of their methodology. Loris is based in Basel, studied architecture in Rome, Milan, and Santiago de Chile. His research centers on the relationship between time and buildings, among other research questions. Since 2020, he is also a teaching assistant at Politecnico di Milano. And Andrea is an architect based in Rome. He studied in Rome, Porto, and Milano. He gained experience in several architectural offices in Porto and Rome, and started his own practice in 2021. His practice is characterized by collaborative efforts dedicated at enhancing projects of public significance. Since 2023, he's also teaching assistant. He's teaching assistant at the University of Rome. And what I've forgotten to say, the project that they're going to present today is called From Space to Environment. So welcome, Loris and Andrea.
Hi everyone, thank you for the presentation. And let's say that today we are going to speak about a couple of topics that we really care about our way to do architecture, our methodology to do architecture in relationship, of course, with the time that we are operating in. So let's say that for a kind of chance, we are most focused on housing and display, but we're speaking about better later. But yeah, let's say that is an ongoing discourse that we just started. And so that's why we call it elementary notes. First impression about this discourse that we are constructing together. So, as I was saying, we are a young practitioner. Our job, most of the time, for the few chances that we had, is dealing with existence, of course, and with a small size building, with clients that have, of course, a small budget, that in a way they want as well, they are not really sure as well what they are going to do in the next 10 years, how they want to live this space. So dealing with this kind of condition of flexibility, of economy of means, economy of tools, economy of budget, of course. And most of the time it happens to us to operate, to work with the generic housing. Why? Because of course we are from Italy, as you said, and of course most of the projects that we are doing, we are based in Italy, and the urban tissue, the urban composition of the housing in Italy, the urban composition in Italy is made by housing. Basically, if you see these graphs, you understand that 90% of the buildings are used like housing. And there is another issue, by the way, that they are quite old. They have at least 50 years, but in reality, the statistic is much more related to the first part of the Second Post-War. And they really need to be renovated. They really need to be manipulated to accomplish new way to live, new way to live this space, of course. So, the housing in Italy, as I was saying, is really old, but its consistency is mainly done after the second post-war. Why? Because there was a huge amount of money from the Marshall Plan. That was the plan from the United States that invested a lot of money in our country, and we used that money to build, to expand the main city centers. These two images are, one is let's say an old picture of Rome and of Matera, sorry, and the other one is a movie, but they are speaking about the same topic. That is the Piano in a Casa. Piano in a Casa was the main plan tool that the government provides for every city to increase the number of housing, to allocate all the migrants that from the rural place of Italy, especially the southern Italy, arrive to the main cities like Milan, Turin, Rome. So of course then the cities start to expand. They almost double the size that they had before, and mainly from 50 to 60 will use all this money to build houses and host these new migrants. And it's really interesting as well, that was a kind of inner process of colonization, because we use the power of the people from south to build the houses that they are going to live then, but was a process to invest money. And
okay, so we're talking about Rome, but this discourse has to do even with other cities. Like much of our housing heritage was built after the Second World War, and how you can see with the blue part, lots of it was built between the 50s and the 70s. So right after the Second World War, in some economy of means, as we were saying before, this building is in Rome, and it shows the construction, which is concrete and infilling. Then this, we were talking about Rome, and this map shows you how the city has developed after the Second World War. So in light red, you can see all the expansions, and we highlighted some of the complexes which has some interest for us, and we are going to talk about Rome is a very big city, but has a very low density. As you can see, all this all the old part is very much dense, and all the rest has spread into these years. And we're going to talk about 3 examples of housing built in those years, which for us is important because it shows a sort of transition between the old tissue of the city and the last buildings that were made in the 19th century that lost this kind of connection with the history. So the first intervention is based in the southeastern part of Rome, and it's an intervention by Adalberto Libera, which is a modernist architect, and it's called Unità d'abitazione orizzontale, which means horizontal unité d'habitation, which is in contrast with the common reference of the housing, of the modern housing, which is Le Corbusier. So this idea was to develop a very high density, low building, with just an exception in the middle with this. The one you see on the right is the building standing in the middle, which is raised on PLP. So, but the rest of the construction is made of these patio houses, which contain in total around like 1,000 people. So it's a very like small intervention, but with high density. And from here you can see like the variety of spaces in the inner courtyards, and this kind of exception in the middle that marks. Like, so there's a funny thing about this intervention, because like all the low density part was destined to families, and the linear building was for singles. So this kind of strange thing, but anyway, like we were focusing more on the plan, on this like possibility of this ground floor. So you can see today how it is. This is the linear building that you see before in the plan, and on the right you can see like all these structure that raising up the higher floors, and today it's like underused. This is another building which is very close. It's slightly on the north, and it's called the Boomerang. You can guess why. And it's a building from Muratori and Deranci. And it's in the higher part of the same intervention. And you can see as well this kind of attitude of the building, like with a lot of different, like showing the structure, and with a lot of like permeabilities on the ground floor. This is the last housing example we are showing, and it's the Villaggio Olimpico, which was built in the 1960s, which is very close to the city center. It was like built to house the athletes for the Olympics of 1960. And as you can see, it's a very extensive like intervention, and it's like the plan shows how this like ground floor was thought like as a very big infrastructure, leaving the space for at the moment was for cars, but today like showing these like potential spaces like these, which are underused and are like mostly abandoned, even if it's very close to the city center. Other interventions were built in the next years, in the 80s and the 90s, like Corviale, which is on the right, or Vigne Nuove, which is another big intervention, which like they take this idea of autonomous buildings to our next level. They are very big, and they are on the outskirts of the city, and today they are in bad conditions. And this is something which was interesting to us, like comparing the structure of the Unità di Azione Orizzontale with the spaces highlighted from the Nolli map in Rome. So this idea that these kind of complexes have a very interesting like ground floor that compares to this historical characteristic and architectural themes in the city of Rome, and like they provide some kind of ritual and common space still today. But this space today is like it's very badly managed and frequently abandoned and used like for store many things, and yeah, as you can see, like not like underused.
Yeah, I mean, these places, in a way, they feel it like peripheral, in a way, because they are just used for parking lots, they are just used for trash. The problem is that all these architects that Andrea was quoting, they were, of course, from a socialist or communist background, because otherwise they could never build something in Rome in that years. But by the way, they had this idea that is quite interesting, to have a switch from a ritual space that is provided in front of a ritual building, like churches, like the typical formal urbis of the Renaissance or Baroque time, to something that, of course, for geographical reasons, was too much far away and unaffordable for these people. But at the same time, providing these collective spaces. But this is the destiny nowadays of this. So the problem is, in our condition nowadays, is the statistics. For instance, I'm operating in, I work as well in Basel, but it's almost the same when you read a brief for a competition or something like that, that is always more suitable for the administration to destroy a building if it doesn't work, if it's problematic, than find strategy to reuse it and reactivate it. And so we were wondering, it exists a way to, even if it's temporary, even if it's for a short period, it exists a way to display these spaces, to provide new services, new features for the people that are still living there. Most of the people that were allocated in this, then they stayed and they bought the house. But yeah, in the meantime, the services of the ground floor lived away because they were not maybe, how would I say, economic for them to stay in such a peripheral place of Rome. And we thought we are really interested in some reply, that some answer that the historic city provides to us, that is the urban display. That is the way that during the Renaissance, during the Baroque, the people, in this case, the Pope, but Sisto V, but we could say the administration of that time used to modify an abundance of space that was at that time Piazza Navona or other places, and to make it usable for the people for a certain moment. Of course, here with a celebrative purpose, of course. But in this optic, it was normal to transform. Of course, these are really radical examples, but it was normal to transform Piazza Navona in a pool, or Piazza del Campo. This is still an ongoing tradition in a let's say playground for the horse races. But what was interesting for us is that even though they had this kind of celebrative imaginario, this action of displaying, of propose something different in the space that we have, was always something for the use of the people in a way. Of course, it was political because they have to justify their richness, they have to justify their inequality. That was the base of that kind of society. But at the same time, they were providing with low tech and temporary architectural tool, really radical transformation of the space. And this transformation, it still exists in a way today, of course, but it's much more relegated to something that is the exhibition, number one. The artistic one, the cultural one, that is really a phenomena that is pervading the society. There are over and over exhibition, cultural events that, by the way, operate in the space, operating a transformation. We can see some example of this. This, for instance, is from Office Kerstengers in Belgium, that just with some curtain provide a radical transformation of this factory in a more cozy and intimate house, intimate space that remind a house. Or this was a little bit much more radical, but it's from Mayo, and with temporary plasterboard transform the Spain pavilion at the Venice Biennale. Or it can happen as well that a vernacular housing like Mahalla in Uzbekistan, it is translated with temporary structure in other places. So the exhibition, they really have this kind of, as was the urban displaying, of transform with relative few elements the space in itself. And today, as I was saying, especially in Italy, this kind of sector, it become really consistent. We were reading that rather after the COVID, in 2022, the exhibition were 10,000 for a year. It means that, like, I don't know, more than 20 in a day, new exhibition in a day. And it's a relative important part of the economic sector. It arrived, the cultural sector related to the exhibition is something like 3 or 4 points of the national economy. So, is I think interesting that we as architects that are using special tools should propose and understand if there is a kind of relationship of this language that can transform, that can propose a temporary use for this abundance of space that instead needs to be repaired and acquire new dignity for the people that are living. And in the latest part of this intervention, we will propose just 3 cases in this direction that, of course, unfortunately, are not speaking exactly of renovation on housing, because we didn't find so far example in this direction, but they are renovating or reusing or proposing a different view of these spaces in different contexts. The first one, we saw it this morning. It is Estate Romana. That was an initiative that the Communist Party organized in Rome from the 76 to the 84 to use basically scaffolding to renovate the historic center of, to reuse, the historic center of Rome and make it a kind of a tool, an everyday tool for the people that were used to go every day, instead to use it just as an object that you can just watch, that you can just, that is not part of your everyday life. Unfortunately, this initiative was, this is the example of a cinema in Basilica di Massenzio, that is quite a punk intervention if we imagine how we treat today the historical heritage, but was a consistent, really a consistent action of reappropriation of an urban device that has a unique and unique and a really important significance for all the collectivity. Nowadays, doesn't happen anymore, and we see that it's a kind of island, this historic center in the city of Rome, that you can just pass by with during a walk and appreciate, but nothing more. This was a little bit more historic, but this is a little bit more contemporary. It happened with the Manifesta in Palermo. Manifesta is a nomadic biennale. I think it's quite famous. We could use whatever example from Manifesta, but we used this one because we were there, so we had an impression of this result. Is Teatro Garibaldi in Palermo. Teatro Garibaldi is this building in La Kelsa that is an historic neighborhood in the city of Palermo that became quite peripheral in terms of lack of services. And was really interesting that this theater that was facing an important square that is Piazza della Magione, close by an historic church, was closed since 40 years. It was built after the unity of Italy. but then after the Second World War, if I'm not wrong, became unused till when Manifesta arrived. And Manifesta organized really a simple renovation, providing just a new way to use this theater that became the base of the exhibition, but as well the base for the offices for Manifesta, but as well a kind of little cinema, but as well a caffè letterario. And you can see from this image that from a closed fence that remained like that probably for 60 years, now it started to be part of the urban settlement of La Elsa, and as well now after this experience to refill the space with temporary elements for exhibition, the space it became part of the University of Palermo as a laboratory for theater. The latest example is Caserma Esperienza Pepe in Venezia. Again, an institution, a cultural institution, instead to provide the exhibition inside the museum, it chose an heritage, something that was not used anymore. This was a military building that was not used since the 90s. And for the Biennale di Venezia of 2018, the French pavilion with the local communities of Lido, because we are not really in the historic center of Venice, but we are a little bit far away in Lido, and they decided with the local communities to renovate it just with simple art of exhibition, to providing a little cinema, but as well a little hostel. And I went, for instance, to go there to enjoy this experience. And it's interesting because even though we were all aware that it was temporary, it really suggested a way to reuse this, this building. So far, after this experience that was like 6 years ago, with the COVID, the initiative was a little bit stuck, but now with Biennale Urbana, that was the association that collaborated with the French Pavilion to do this installation alongside other architects like Parasite 2.0, they convinced the administration to use this as a student residency. So we want to conclude like a circle with the idea with which we arrived in Lina. That is the reusing of a common heritage, reusing with temporary elements that are engaging in the exhibition, the display, the transformation of the space, dealing with architectural tools, but as well with cultural institutions that, as we show briefly with these three cases, they are really in a position nowadays to take care about something like this.
Any direct questions? Mika?
Maybe I have to.
This is your role, so yeah.
Front row student. Well, I mean, I was thinking that somehow in the beginning when you were showing those modernist, starting from these kind of housing projects and kind of their existence, and I mean, I guess that similar-ish kind of moments can be found in many countries. And then even in Finland, I sometimes wonder how much sort of care it has required to actually design those spaces, and there's sort of the architecture is there, but then there's nothing there. The use is so completely opposite of maybe what, I don't know if the idea has been that people would just enjoy the space or what do they do in those. But then it's kind of interesting that because the architectural, somehow the potential is so high, in some way, I don't know, or like that the imaginary is actually there. That if you propose things that are a little bit like, sort of like equally high imaginary objects, and something, there is a kind of a weird match there. That it's not out of the place because it sort of like belongs to the same sort of reason why they're there, and that's kind of an interesting observation. But I do also wonder if you have any information about the origins of those designs. That was there something that was supposed to be there? Were there supposed to be those spaces that they are in the community's use? I mean, this is obviously a kind of an ailment of modern architecture that it often has sort of copied this old kind of classical city shapes, but not really the functionality of those cities. But yeah.
Yeah. For instance, if we took as an example just this one, I mean, it's always easy to say that maybe an old architect didn't get nothing in the space, what was not working anyway, but in reality, the fact is that this building were facing some needs that are completely lost. Like, these places were focused for workers with a strong identity of collectivity. So there was the, I don't know to translate, sezione di partito, the place for the reunion of the party that used to, all these places were like for the after work, for a mutual, I don't know to say, help. So there was like place for wash the clothes together, or I don't know.
Yeah, but a lot of them were simply empty because it was a sort of like utopistic idea or like positivist, of modernist housing who would respond to all the needs of the people that at that time was having a car, so parking the car below the building, which nowadays makes no sense. Like even because like the cars are there, but they're not like parked under the building, so you get the two things like a completely like empty ground floor, at the same time you have all the cars like going around the building. So like the idea of this like connection between the Roman housing of that time, like 50s, 60s, and the like historical tissue of the city of Rome was this kind of idea of this common ground, which is like obviously a slightly generic idea, but deals a bit with this idea of infrastructure that during time has provided like the historical city, and nowadays in some sense even in these middle cases, which are not like the big cases of Krvavica, these other big mega structure that have been built just after this, like in the 90s, 80s, 90s. These in the 60s still have some kind of reference to the old like city, and in some sense they provide a good example of what these common places could be and could represent even symbolically for the communities living there.
Maybe a question on political organizing. Do you know what was the lowest administrative kind of representational of the community? It's interesting also in Yugoslav context that the system of local council, district councils were created at that time as well. So also some of the communal spaces were designed or supposed to be designed and developing new communities also for gathering not only of workers but also of citizens into political, let's say, aggregation.
Yeah, so, sorry, again, the question is if if this free space was
The ground floor, but also the administrative, was it also designed in a way that there were neighborhood councils or local councils thought more in a political way also of organizing of community?
well, I would argue that these, first of all these, let's say, all these intervention, especially this one that we show, these were done as a complete neighborhood, let's say, intervention. That was provided as a social housing initiative. It means that you were not allowed to buy this, but you were assigned to have it for for a while. Then you, in a certain moment, this thing changed, and you were allowed to buy your house and then give it to your family and pass by, etc. But in general, all these intervention used to belong to the administration, or public heritage in a way. So they were as well free to assign, let's say, these, for instance, in the Villaggio Olimpico, all the places belong to commercial initiative or something like that. But then something happened that basically, no, I don't know, the economical crisis that are keep going decades after decades just make it fragile, a certain kind of economy, and these spaces started to be just not used anymore. But I don't know if I reply exactly to your question.
I'll ask, yeah, later, but yeah, understand.
If you're not tired, we just have 2 more questions or confessions, please.
No, it was a question. No, I was just wondering, have you find any examples of this kind of like same typology where they have this like open structure in the ground level where the people or residents have been using the space?
I would say, I mean, if I have in mind Arcese as well in Milan, that are 2, one from Maimonino, one from Aldo Rossi, or if I have to think about as well some building from the BPR, I would say that are always not used. Rather, there is always an abundance space. This is, I think, the main. But for instance, for this kind of house that we are saying, from 50 till 60, let's say. I don't know if you have in mind something different.
No, I wouldn't. Like our intent was more like trying to depict the possibility, and of course we we think this comes from a different need of the people at the time, and today can be rethought. And of course we picked some other examples because we couldn't find others that were like strictly connected to the housing thing. But yes.
It's a little bit. So no, I think that I think that they are not so common. I even say, I mean, then there are even much more problematic examples like Sine in Palermo, a lot of housing that think like that, like with abundance of spaces for collectivity. But we are not looking at these spaces. I think that we need to underline this, that we are not looking at these spaces as problematic, but as potential. Because it's easy, I mean, when we show not this one, but yeah, this unfortunately is cut. But here is full of people. I mean, there was a moment when it was built, when the society works in a different way, really. Where the concept of neighborhood was much more present nowadays. That I think that these were really an expression of that kind of society. But nowadays they are existing, so what we are to do with it?
Can I maybe follow up the question? It's, I don't know who was it before. Okay, it's directly connected. It's interesting, so they're not working, especially, I'm curious because having studied in Italy, that these mega structures are still being kind of idealized, especially you mentioned.
In the pedagogy.
Yes,
Yeah.
and are being taught, but nothing is being learned from the failures or from acknowledging that maybe this was working in a specific political context or a neighborhood management, and still being reproduced and idealized, these typologies. I remember my colleagues were designing mega structures still in their architecture, not as a kind of exercise, but like a real project. So how do you see this connection with architectural pedagogies relating to what you have been studying?
Yeah, I think there is a like kind of ideological connection, like sort of nostalgia of a lost time in which Italy was like rich, and like those kind of those kind of like architecture are connected to a moment in which like we would like build, and I think this kind of they were even like connected to like to an ideological party in Italy, like all those architects, as Doris was saying, they were like on left, like communist or socialist people, and so there is this kind of nostalgia. I think today still there are some people like trying to teaching of the like this and like emulating this kind of buildings, but I think this cannot be right. What we were trying to say is that like these kind of middle spaces still could work today, but we will not take it as a direct reference to build something new. Like if we were talking about like Krvavica or other bigger buildings, this would like definitely be more difficult because it's something that doesn't work and doesn't have the scale to work even as a case study.
There are neither the money. I mean, I think that last year you were speaking about a project by Vigano, a building by Vigano, Melchiode. He did as well Politecnico, the building of Politecnico in Milan. And it is a kind of little mega structure in a way. It's like really an expression of grandeur of something, of some elements, etc. It's a nice building, but if I was reading that if you want to build nowadays, let's say for the standard of the euros per square meters, is completely out of budget. But just because the economy was different, the resources were different. But to reply to your question, as well, I think a problem of ambiguity of architecture, because architecture is really a complex ensemble of system and sign and elements and space, and it's easy to get in love, for instance, of this idea of ballatoio. That here, for instance, in the Casa dei Singoli, it really works. It has really a nice proportion, etc. But then it's not so easy to understand that maybe one element is still contemporary, another not really. You take it as a reference. But yeah.
So quick question. Yeah, you said that you don't look at buildings like megastructures like Krvavica, but I would say that is a positive example, because what is with the fact, I don't know how it is now, but I was reading that, for example, that the middle, this terrace, this free terrace, open terrace in Krvavica is quoted. And I think most of the population that is living in Krvavica are homeless people, so that is a potential. Also, Torre de David, that is also something like the structure, like it's standing and it's taking use of. Why don't you see these buildings?
No, to
Or why we are
more to the yeah, maybe was to translate that sentence. More than we don't see it is that so far we were really concentrated on the first part of the first period, Second World War. That is already an abundance of that of casuistic to analyze. And yeah, I mean, this is and the typology, the dimension from the 50 to 60 are all of them commiserating in terms of extension. Krvavica, it came inside another typology, that is the megastructure. That is, I think, another further research in a way. We were now really focused on this, that has this really common quality, that is the abundance of space on the common ground.
Yeah, of course, Krvavica is a resource today because it is there and it's actually coming from some point of view. It's a good architecture, but at the same time, like this part that you were mentioning, that was devoted to like shops in the beginning, like it was occupied, and nowadays they're like renovating it and making new apartments for people. So obviously that's good, but and that's like an architecture that in some sense can respond to some kind of flexibility in time. But maybe for the place where Krvavica is, for the dimension, something has gone wrong, obviously, because today it's obviously a place where people live and they still have to live there. I think it's important. At the same time, I wouldn't take it as a positive example in terms of like overall development, and because obviously it's not what we want for the buildings to be abandoned in part into.
Yeah, no, I was not thinking like positive example in terms of architecture and urban development, but of reusing of space, of abandoned space.
Sorry, I understood it in a bad way,
but I think, yeah, it's really a matter of a jump of scale,
yeah,
a jump of logic. I think that we could say really in the simplistic way that the example before, the 90% positive, let's say, and the 10% has to be, in a way, used in a different way to improve the contemporary condition. This is the reverse, in a way, no? Because it's 1 kilometer longer with a lot of uniformity.
Okay, sorry for interrupting you.
No,
I've received a message from the Central Committee in the meanwhile. Saying the Central Committee has decided that you have deserved a 5-minute break. But only 5 minutes.
Yeah. But before the Central Committee also has a public announcement. No. Referring to your lecture, of course. Just briefly to bring this from another perspective and my own dislocated positionality as an exhibition maker, because I've been doing it for years now, and actually coming from that field. Because you showed us beautiful examples of beautiful exhibitions, refurbishments of spaces, whether indoors and outdoors. In a sense, they're quite monumental. So, like grand gesture of changing. Actually, even decades ago, colleagues who have been in this exhibition-making business, as you were telling, the economy of Italy actually coming to 3% or something more, already then they were depleted, devoid, and tired of exhibitions. You know, also working with colleagues and saying like exhibitions do not make sense anymore. You know, how can we think beyond the exhibition or some sort of an exhibitionary act? And in fact, you know, beyond this grandiosity. So, in the reactivation, in the possible renovation of a place, either round or small, and just bring this insight, you know, that was transgenerationally embodied in me, you know.
Yeah. Of course, yeah, the collection of intervention was in a way fantastic, but we wanted to push to the role that some institutions that are still existing, that will exist in a way, so will operate during the exhibition, they can achieve. Like for instance, but beyond that, the point that maybe was not is still not clear, because we are, by the way, skeptical. We are constructing a discourse in this sense. Is that what we are really interested is the possibility of suggest something to the exhibition. So it is not related to the. To me, Caserma Pepe is really interesting in this way because it was an inauguration at the end of self-construction that suggested that you can dwell this old military fabric as a dormitory, as a moreover as a co-housing, because it was provided of atelier, etc. Everything was in at the end self-construction and had visibility. The only benefit from Venice Biennale was the visibility, was what they realized during the same period. That's it. But so the thing is that, of course, according with the condition that are with the budget, with the possibility that you can do, the matter is more suggest a possibility for that space, because this creates the public debate to encourage administration to take some decision instead of others. And this is really the case, because now we're going to be a residence, a student residence for Catholic school for the University of Brazil.
Thank you. Thank you. And now,
Now,
very
finally.
important.